this over here because she gets to wear the wireless one, and I'm going to use this one. But I have a booming voice, so hopefully that won't be a problem because I have a tendency to walk around a little bit, so I'm just going to try to anchor myself here. First of all, thank you, Dr. Ellerby, for such a wonderful venue for us. And Jane, thank you, Jan. Thank you for being so amazing and inviting us. We are honored, as per usual. I have been writing about integrative wellness and publishing integrative health information for 25 years now, but I am passionate about cancer care, and let me explain why. It started when my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, and then our mom died of advanced pancreatic cancer, and then I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and the shocking thing is that that took place in less than 8 months. Completely transformed my life. Since that time, my brother was diagnosed with cancer, so that means out of our family of 8, 6 kids and my folks, 50% of us have been diagnosed with cancer. I often say that I would like to be writing about horses and puppies, but for some reason cancer chose me, and I've been on this path. One of the things that I love most is my work with Dr. Lise Alschuler. She really epitomizes being a true healer. She's an award-winning naturopathic oncologist. She is my co-author, my co-host on radio, and most of all, we have a business together, but most of all, she is a very dear friend, and it's my honor to have Lise kick things off for us today.
So it's really my honor to get to speak with Karolyn today. We don't get to do that very often, and you'll soon find Karolyn is a treat and a delight and really a force in her own right. So this is quite a privilege for me as well. And I'm getting some interference, so I'm going to find the perfect sweet spot. Okay, we've been in this beautiful world of heart, and now we're going to take you, boom, right into biochemistry. You ready? Yeah. Okay. Because we don't want to forget about our bodies. After all, we do walk around in them. So we're going to learn a little bit in a quick manner about how to bring some support to our bodies. And we have a lot to cover, so we're going to give you more of a tour more than anything. But when we talk and when we write, Karolyn and I, about this topic, we're really talking about cancer prevention. Now that may seem odd since many of you have already been diagnosed. I'm a breast cancer survivor. Karolyn's an ovarian cancer survivor. The train's already left the station, right? What does this have to do with us? In fact, it has a lot to do with us, because if we switch this definition around a little bit, you'll see that this is very pertinent. This is actually a definition that was written by the World Health Organization in 1948. Not bad. They said health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Pretty good for that time period, I would say, but it's not quite, doesn't quite sit right. For one thing, complete. I mean, come on. Who's ever in a complete state of health in all these areas? So let's take that out. And I'm not so thrilled with the idea that we can only have health when we only are absent, or there's just some wording that's a little bit off about this. So let's try this. Health is a state of physical, mental, and social well-being in the presence or the absence of disease or infirmity. Now what we're talking about when we talk about cancer prevention is preventing the dis-ease of cancer, the illness of cancer. So we can be very healthy and still have cancer in our bodies. And that, to us, is really what true cancer prevention is about. So, whatever you hear today, it's applicable, no matter where you are in this journey. Having said that, cancer itself is for sure an obstacle in our way. There is nothing nice about cancer. I mean, let's be frank. It can open up beautiful doors of healing on many levels that we've spoken about so far today, but on a purely physical level, it's a destructive force, make no mistake. And so we have to deal with the cancer itself. What we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about is the weapons that we have that target the tumor. So we're not going to spend time talking about chemotherapy, radiation, targeted therapy. That's not because we don't believe that they're necessary for many people, but that's really not the purpose of our talk. But in fact, many of you who have received those therapies have done that as a part of your healing to destroy a very destructive force in your body. So we just, and I'm a naturopathic doctor, but I have nothing against conventional medicine on that note. And having done that, though, having embarked upon the path to destroy the cancer, that's not enough. So unfortunately, the vast majority of people that are treated for cancer in this country all the effort is about destroying the tumor. But guess what? That tumor lives in somebody, and that somebody gets neglected in the process. And it's really the milieu within which that tumor resides that we need to pay some attention to. How can we change the milieu of our body to make it less favorable for cancer, to make it harder for cancer to grow, and make it easier for health to flourish? That's really what we're talking about today. And in our work on this topic, we've discovered that there are really 5 key pathways, which I call the superhighways of influence. These pathways are the most influential in determining the milieu or the terrain of our body, and whether it's oriented towards health or towards disease. And these 5 pathways, which I'll explain in a little bit, are inflammation, insulin resistance, immunity, digestion detoxification, and hormonal balance. So hang on to that, park that for a moment, we'll come back to that. And furthermore, interestingly enough, there's 5 key lifestyle strategies that have the most impact on those pathways. And those 5 key lifestyle strategies fall into the categories of diet, of movement, of dietary supplementation, of spirit, and rejuvenation. So we're going to touch on each one of those strategies today as well. Now, understanding this and this connection has become really interesting in the last, really, I would say maybe about 10 years, because the science of epigenetics has found its way to oncology. And there's sort of 2 phases or 2 levels of epigenetics. One level is there is a certain degree of epigenetics, and I'll define it in a moment, that we don't really have a lot of control over. It comes through generationally. But there's this whole other side of epigenetics that happens as we go through our lives. So what the heck am I talking about? So let's just, in our mind's eye for a moment, take ourselves all the way down through our tissues to the very level of the cell, of which we have trillions of them. And inside every cell in your body, there's a nucleus, and within the nucleus, there's a coiled ladder, which, Watson and Crick's discovered as DNA. And that DNA holds or houses our genes. And each gene is an instruction. So when the genes are read, that instruction is read, and out of that instruction comes some function, some protein is made, which allows the cell to engage in a certain behavior, ultimately culminating in everything we do. Your ability to sit here, your ability to listen, my ability to talk. It's all the result of genes and their activity. Now, as it turns out, our genes, not all of our genes are being expressed all the time. Some are turned on, some are turned off. And that pattern of which genes are turned on and turned off has a lot to do with our health. Furthermore, we've discovered that the way in which we live our lives, the food we eat, the activity we get, the sleep we do or don't get, our emotional state influences which genes are turned on and which genes are turned off. If you think about an instruction book, let's say you had a book because you're building a doghouse. That's random, but you're building a doghouse. And you have an instruction book, and you decide as you're going through the instruction book, now I'm really stuck because I don't even know what that book would say, but I'm going to make this up. You come across this page that says, okay, here's how you make a tiled roof. And you're like, oh, I know how to do that. And the next page is, and here's how you paint red shutters. You're like, I know how to do that. I'm going to paperclip those pages together because I don't need to read those instructions. Then you come to a page that says, here's how you make corners. And another page which says, here's how you level the bottom. And you're like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. I'm going to put a Post-it note on those pages because I need to know how to do that. And I need to keep referring to those instructions. Turns out, metaphorically speaking, that there are Post-it notes and paper clips on your DNA. And that, in fact, certain genes are held in the off, unread position, paper clipped, and other genes have Post-it notes on them, and they're stuck in the on, read position. Now, in your DNA, there are some genes that are what we call tumor suppressor genes. These are genes which do things in the cell that allow us to turn down and turn off tumors. In people with cancers, what we see is that those tumor suppressor genes unfortunately have Post-it notes on them. And on the other hand, there are tumor repressor genes or cell repair genes which do a lot of repair and help prevent cancer. And many times, unfortunately, in people with cancer, those cell repair genes have paper clips on them, so they don't get read. And again, going back to this premise, the way we live our lives, the exercise we do, the sleep we get, the mood we have, et cetera, changes the placement of those paper clips and Post-it notes. So this is actually a really empowering message because what this tells us is that we have the ability to make choices in how we live our lives and literally change the expression of our genome. And we can change the expression of our genome towards greater health, and away from sickness to some extent, which is really where the power of this information is so important.
Yes. Angelina Jolie. I have a lot in common. Well, not a lot. I have something in common with Angelina. Unfortunately, it's not her net income. But Angelina Jolie's family and my family have the breast ovarian cancer gene, BRCA. In fact, our extended family of first cousins have been studied by Creighton University, and it was found that our family is one of the largest known carriers of the BRCA gene in North America. But the reality is that Angelina's family and my family are quite rare. Only 5 to 10% of cancers are caused by an inherited gene. That means that 90 to 95% of cancers are caused by other reasons: diet, lifestyle, and environment. So that's a very empowering message as well. But the real million-dollar question that Dr. Alschuler just answered: can we, in fact, influence how our genes behave? And yes, we can. And this is really eloquently illustrated with a study involving women with the BRCA gene. So the BRCA gene is a cell repair gene. It's a very powerful cell repair gene, but it's not the only cell repair gene that we have. So what epigenetics tells us is that we can actually shore up these other cell repair genes and help compensate somewhat for the mutated BRCA gene. We can't change that mutated BRCA gene. Once it's mutated, you know it's mutated. So this study that we just love was lots of women who are BRCA positive, and the researchers found that the BRCA positive women who ate the most fruits and vegetables actually significantly reduced their risk of developing breast cancer, even though they were BRCA positive. The same research found that the women who maintained normal body weight, even though they were BRCA positive, they significantly reduced their risk of developing cancer compared to the obese women with the BRCA gene. So if this can happen in women who have the mutated gene, imagine what it can happen for the 90 to 95% of others. Now, to my family, this is like winning the lottery.
Okay, here's where we get down and dirty. So I want to take you on a tour through these 5 superhighways of influence, because it's my belief that the more we at least have an inkling of an understanding of how our bodies work, perhaps there can be a little more motivation to make some of these hard lifestyle changes that we're asked to make to create healthier bodies. So let's start with the immune system. The immune system is very complicated. There are many different kinds of immune cells. We're still discovering new immune cells now. Immunologists are still discovering them. And the immune system is a highly orchestrated system that is really all about regulation and information going from one cell type to another, turning things on, turning things off, responding to insults, recognizing insults. It's very much like an orchestra. And you know, when people are diagnosed with cancer, they often say, gosh, if I just had a stronger immune system, I wouldn't have developed cancer. But that's like saying, I want to go hear Beethoven's Fifth, and I want to hear the best Beethoven's Fifth ever, so that I just want that orchestra to play loud the whole time. That's going to sound terrible, right? What you really want to hear is you want the violins to come in when they're supposed to, you want the cellists to come in when they're supposed to, you want the crescendos and the decrescendos, the discordance and the concordance. I just learned my new words for the day. You want all of that to happen. That's what you want in your immune system too. You want your immune cells to be very intricately choreographed to provide you with adequate defense. So this is a much more complex proposition, if you will. And we'll talk about some of the ways to do that. Moving on, I'm going to talk now about the inflammatory key pathway, because it's a bit related to the immune system, since part of the inflammatory response is really an immune-driven response. When I'm talking about inflammation, especially as it's linked to cancer, I'm talking about chronic inflammation. So let's use the analogy of fire. When you have a roaring fire, that's acute inflammation. That's what happens if you get a cut or if you hit your hand. All that redness, the swelling, the heat, that's acute inflammatory response. What's happening in that tissue area is a very healing response. Your blood vessels get leaky, and they actually even start to sprout new blood vessels so that you can bring more nutrients and immune cells into the area. Those immune cells come in, they release chemicals that cause the resident cells in that tissue to divide faster, to heal up the injury. Cells that are normally anchored actually become unanchored, and they can roll into the areas of injury to patch up that particularly damaged tissue. Perfect idea if you have an acute injury. But now what if you have chronic inflammatory insults? For example, you're eating foods that are inflaming your digestive tract every day. You have an infection, a chronic infection. You are exposed to certain environmental toxins. All of these things can trigger the same reaction that that cut does at a muted level. So now we're talking about the embers, not the blazing fire. But these embers are still fueled by the same chemicals and the same processes that fuel the big fire. So now you have more cells that are dividing faster, you have cells that are not anchored, you have more blood supply. These are all characteristics of cancer. So an inflamed body is the perfect, if you want to grow a tumor, just inflame your body. It's a really great environment for cancers to grow. So therefore the converse is true as well. If we want to make our bodies less hospitable to cancer, we need to work on decreasing our inflammation. So how do you know if you're chronically inflamed? There are actually lots of ways we can figure this out, and I would recommend for some of these assessments that you go see a practitioner. And by the way, you are fortunate to be in Denver because you happen to have a wonderful naturopathic oncologist working here, Dr. Jacob Shore, who's in the room, and he's really phenomenal. So avail yourselves of his services, Denver Naturopathic Clinic. So if you have if you might be chronically inflamed, you're not sure, you want to know, you can get clues like, is your cholesterol high? Cholesterol is actually a healing molecule. It's secreted and it's made by the liver in response to injury in the vessels. So if you have cholesterol that's high, it doesn't go down with medications, that's a good sign that there's something else underneath that cholesterol that's causing that cholesterol to get driven up. If you have a lot of copper and copper-related chemicals in the body, that's a sign that there's a lot of angiogenesis or new blood growth going on, which shouldn't necessarily be the case, but would be the case if there was a sort of the inflammatory environment in your body. There's a molecule called galectin-3, which is like a little glue molecule that cancer cells use to pull themselves through blood vessels and set up house in other parts of the body or metastasize. And galectin-3 can be measured and actually is also an indicator of inflammation, and in fact is a risk factor for both cancer and cardiovascular disease. And there are other compounds that can be measured in the blood. So all of this, you don't have to remember any of this, but it's just to say that there are ways to objectively assess whether you might have chronic inflammation in your body. Okay, now let's move on to hormonal balance. So there's a lot of nuance here, but I'm just going to focus on the stress response because this is really key, especially to cancer. So we heard about this from Dr. Finkelstein earlier, but if we think about the stress response, this was originally absolutely integral to our ancestors' survival. Because if they were walking around in their loincloth and they saw this tiger in the grass, you want a stress response system that's going to immediately recognize that tiger as it jumps up to run after you. You say, oh boy, I better get out of here, and you run away from the tiger, right? So activated stress response system. But if that happens enough, if you happen to have set up your hut in a field of tigers, pretty soon everything's going to look like a tiger to you. So you see a boulder in a grass and your brain says, I think that might be a tiger, I better run just in case. And you start running from all sorts of things. Fast forward to our generation now, just like you said earlier, now we don't see tigers and boulders in grass, we see modern living, all the stresses of modern living. And it can be little stresses that are repetitive. Run out of half and half for your morning coffee. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Your kids aren't doing well in school. Any number of stresses that build up keeps that system in a stuck-on position. And when that happens, those stress hormones are very deleterious. They actually break down our defenses over time. They unravel our immunity. They precipitate inflammation. They alter our digestion and detoxification. So it's a very, very deleterious situation. So this is a really critical pathway as well. And again, we can measure this to some extent. There's a test that certain doctors can do to look at one of the end stress hormones called cortisol. There should be a nice daily wave pattern to it, and this can be measured so that you can, and the doctor can interpret the pattern to determine where your stress response system might be and where it might need to be reset. In general, people who have a chronically turned on stress response system tend to be tired, they tend to be irritable, they tend to be, they have difficulty coping with stress, they have a lot of trouble with weight gain. Might sound somewhat familiar, this category of symptoms. A lot of us are in this kind of situation. And I just want to do a call out to the thyroid gland as well. the stress response system and the thyroid gland are buddies, and they collaborate in a lot of ways in the body. And very often when people have excessively high stress, there's often something wrong with their thyroid gland as well, and that should be measured too. And very important, because people with cancer who have low thyroid function tend to have poor cell repair, and it actually is a risk factor for further cancer development. Okay, so now moving on to another pathway. I told you this would be fast, but just hang in there. Insulin resistance. This is another very important pathway, and it's emerging now to be, in some way or another, impactful in at least 1 out of every 3 cancers that exist. So this is something that's particularly problematic. This has a lot to do with what's happening to our waistlines. If you've noticed, our waistlines are getting bigger, and they're getting bigger at an earlier age. And in fact, more and more people walking around on the planet are overweight and have basically a pre-diabetic condition called insulin resistance at a fairly, sometimes young age, but certainly long enough to start to unravel our health as well. So what does this mean? Generally speaking, and this is a bit oversimplified, if we live a life where we tend to eat processed foods and we eat, say, refined carbohydrates, so white sugar, white flour, saturated fats, which would be things, anything found, any baked good in a package, or some meat, some commercially fed meat from commercially fed animals. We eat that kind of diet. We don't get very much exercise. Maybe we don't get quite enough sleep. That's the perfect recipe for setting up insulin resistance. Our blood sugars start to climb in that environment. Our pancreas responds by secreting insulin, because insulin is a chaperone for sugar. So literally, insulin hooks its arm around sugar and says, hey, sugar, let's go into the cell. Come on. And the insulin and the sugar, the insulin has his own special door. It's a him, of course. And the door opens and brings sugar right in. Inside the cell, the sugar is made into energy. All's good. But what happens if you have a lot of sugar and a lot of insulin as a response in your bloodstream? Eventually, the cells say, enough, I don't want any more. And they change the locks. And now insulin can't get in. The other thing that can happen is that that insulin door, which is actually an insulin receptor on a cell, can be damaged by environmental toxins, which is a known cause of insulin resistance. Certain nutrient deficiencies like magnesium and B6 can cause insulin resistance because the receptor needs those molecules to function. So there's a lot of ways we can develop insulin resistance. And when we're insulin resistant, our cells eventually don't get enough sugar. And in the meantime, with this extra sugar and insulin in the blood, let's say you have a little pod of cells that are malignant and they're growing along. Cancer cells have a voracious appetite because they're very bad metabolizers of energy. They need a lot of it because they're so bad or inefficient at utilizing it to make energy. So they literally cover their surfaces with insulin receptors. And unfortunately, when the rest of your body is insulin resistant, your cancer cells are not ever insulin resistant. So instead of that insulin and sugar going to your healthy cells, it preferentially gets soaked up by your cancer cells. And that's problematic for 2 reasons. One, you're feeding your cancer, so to speak, but really more the issue is the insulin, because insulin, as it gets into the cell, lets go of sugar, it actually goes through the nucleus and has an epigenetic effect, and it turns on genes that cause that cell to divide faster. So insulin is like putting your foot on the gas pedal, and it actually is directly stimulating cancer growth. So insulin resistance, therefore, becomes an issue. How do you know if you're insulin resistant? Extra belly fat, for one. You try to lose weight with a good diet and exercise, and you just can't lose weight. You might have high triglycerides and low HDL. Good sign that you probably have insulin resistance, and then, of course, there's some labs that we can do to confirm that. Okay, so last pathway, digestion and detoxification. I'm going to use another metaphor. When you eat, sort of a metaphor, when you eat food, you have your digestive system has essentially 2 functions. One is it needs to break down that food to get the nutrients out so you can get the nutrients that your body needs. And the other is a sifting function, and it needs to help you excrete and break down or metabolize things that are toxic in the foods, either inherently in the food or whenever we eat, we breathe in air and there's toxins in our air. So we need to be able to sift out those things. The toxins that are coming in from our digestive tract get bundled up and sort of broken down, and you can think of that as putting those toxins into a garbage bag. That would be called phase 1 detoxification. That occurs in the liver. And then those garbage bags need to be collected. And the garbage bags need to go out into the garbage trucks, which is called phase 2 detoxification in the liver. So when everything's working fine, this is a perfect system of detoxification. However, in a situation where we have an overwhelming amount of toxins coming in, we run out of garbage bags potentially, and or the garbage collectors go on strike, so we don't have enough garbage trucks, and pretty soon that trash starts to get kind of stinky. And when it gets stinky, it accumulates in the liver, it spreads through the body, and we have toxins or biotoxicants that are circulating throughout our body and actually cause damage to our DNA and can, in that way, precipitate cancer. So digestion detoxification is another very important pathway. We can also assess detoxification. If people are really overwhelmed with these toxins, they tend to also be somewhat symptomatic. People can feel very sluggish. They can have a lot of fatigue that's not really well explained, joint achiness. They might not think very clearly, just feel generally unwell for a period of time. And again, there's some tests that certain integrative practitioners can run to help confirm that endotoxemia.
Whew, covered a lot, right? Man. Well, now we're going to talk about how we can positively impact those 5 key pathways, because that's really the key. What we'd like you to do during this next section is just be thinking about what area are you strongest, what area are you maybe weakest, and remember, you don't have to be perfect in all 5 areas. So the first area is one of our faves, and it's movement. Now, look at this list. When you're physically active, you're building your bones, you're strengthening your immune system, you're building your brain health, you're reducing inflammation. And then if you look at the middle part of the list, studies actually show that exercise will help you reduce the risk of many common cancers. So what's not up here are the mental health benefits. Research clearly indicates that people who exercise have less depression, less anxiety, and they're just happier. So what we think, if there was such a thing as a magic bullet, right here, it's movement. We're always asked, how much? And this is the magic number. 30 minutes, 5 times a week. And if you think about it, that's only 2% of your day. You know, we should be able to do that. But just a word of caution, too. If you haven't been exercising, if you've been sedentary, if you have some physical challenges, see your doctor before you embark on an exercise program. But exercise is absolutely critical. And it's very important to get enough exercise, but there's new research that has made me very happy, because I'm going to date myself here, but I'm not a real Olivia Newton-John, jazzercise kind of a girl. You know, going to the gym isn't my thing, and I always felt guilty because I didn't go to the gym. But new research is showing us that when we string together moments of movement throughout the day, it's just as powerful as going to the gym at the end of the day. So that's the key, movement. We like to think about it. I wore this little pearl necklace that I got as a gift. Kind of like you're building a pearl necklace throughout the day. Every 3 minutes is a pearl. How long is your necklace going to be at the end of the day? We also know that intensity does count. Now, here are 3 categories: light, moderate, and vigorous. And there are a lot of different things, and you can see with this slide that there's a progression, you know, walking all the way up to running. The critical thing is that the scientific research is showing us that the more intensity, the better. For example, there was a study involving women and breast cancer risk. The women who were in that middle category, those moderate exercisers, they had a 25% less chance of dying of breast cancer than the non-exercisers. And how about the guys? Well, there was a study showing that men who were in the N category, the vigorous category, they had a 67% reduced risk of developing advanced prostate cancer compared to non-exercisers. And they had a 74% reduced risk of dying of prostate cancer compared to the non-exercisers. This, folks, is really powerful medicine. And this is my horse bow. Lise and I have an agreement that he has to make an appearance even when I'm not with her. But really, we really believe that we need to exercise with exuberance. And Bo is kind of my exercise role model because he loves to move, and I love to watch him move. We need to find out what makes us happy when we're moving. The takeaway message for exercise is to not be sedentary. In fact, the American Institute of Cancer Research came out with a very, very bold statement. They said that sitting is the new smoking when it comes to risk for cancer. Now, we all know that smoking is carcinogenic. Sitting is the new smoking when it comes to risk. So our advice is every 90 minutes, get up and move around for 3. That seems to be a really good goal. If you have to put a sticky or set a timer, try to move every 90 minutes.
Okay, so moving on to diet. Of course, there's a lot we could say about diet, and everybody has their own diet that's going to work. My diet is not going to work for Karolyn very well, who's maybe her diet's not going to work for Jan, and we all have different diets. But if we look at all the diets that have been studied in relationship to cancer risk, there is a common denominator, and it was really nicely demonstrated in this study. This was a big study, almost 115,000 adults that were followed forward for 14 years. And they found in general that those adults who ate the most plant food, vegetables and fruits, who tended to eat according to their body weights, they didn't overeat as much, they minimized their alcohol, and they exercised, they reduced their risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer substantially. And as you can see from the slide, just in terms of cancer, men had a 30% lower risk and women had a 24% lower risk of developing cancer. So the common denominator across all cancer diets, without hesitation, is a plant-based diet. That's the most important dietary takeaway that you can bring with you from today. But getting a little more nuanced about it, we can also keep this really simple and just have a do more and a do less side of things. So on the do more side, we want to eat organic and colorful fruits and vegetables, plant foods. Why organic? As much as possible, because we don't need to get the extra pesticides and herbicides on plant food, which now have been shown to be even more problematic because of GMOs. Those GMO foods actually are demanding more pesticide use. So pesticide foods are even more pesticide full now than they were. And these pesticides are toxins. They're carcinogens, many of them. So whenever possible, eat organic. There's a great list by the Environmental Working Group called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, which helps you if you can't buy everything organic. It helps you figure out the Clean 15 are okay not to buy organically because there are not very many pesticides. The Dirty Dozen need to be organic. So you can get that online, put it on your phone. EWG.org is their website. Lots of colors. Why lots of colors? Because every compound that makes color in a plant food is a flavonoid compound. And flavonoids are only found in plants, and they have incredible value to us. They have anti-inflammatory properties. They support our immune system. They support our detoxification. They have direct anti-cancer properties. So we need to get as many of those flavonoids in as possible. We also want to eat whole grains. So when a grain is brown and crunchy, it has fiber in it, it has nutrients in it. When it's white and fluffy, it doesn't have any of that in it, and it's really just glucose or sugar. We want to make sure that we spice up our food as much as possible. Culinary spices are full of antioxidants, and antioxidants are very helpful for preserving our cellular integrity. We also want to get good quality fats from nuts, from seeds, from plants like avocados and coconuts and the oils from those plants and olives and their oils, because these essential fats are directly anti-inflammatory. And we want to also make sure that when we do eat meat, if we eat meat, that we eat meat that comes from animals that have grazed on the plains, that have eaten grass, because they're getting the nutrients from the grass, which grass is full of good fats, and that translates into the meat of these animals so that that meat tends to be less inflammatory. If we eat meat from commercially fed animals, not only is there bad karma there, but that animal also has a lot of inflammatory compounds in its meat because of the diet it was fed. And then finally, we want to keep ourselves well hydrated with clean water and organic tea. So on the eat less side, we want to make sure that we don't add extra sugar and salt to our diet. Each of those, sugar and salt, have been independently linked to increased cancer risk as well as increased cardiovascular disease risk. So a low salt, low sugar diet is important. We want to avoid, of course, preservatives, additives. So basically anything that comes wrapped in a plastic package, which we can't open nowadays anyway, they're made so tight, and anything that has an ingredient on it that you can't pronounce, or if it was in your kitchen you wouldn't know how to cook with it, should not be eaten. That's kind of the rule. We also want to minimize or avoid alcohol and soft drinks, which are both carcinogenic or cancer-causing. We want to reduce refined carbohydrates, as I mentioned earlier. Any grain that's been milled and processed loses its vitamins, loses its fiber. We want to avoid saturated fats and trans fats, which are found in mass-produced baked goods and also found in commercially fed animal meat. And then finally, we want to just reduce the amount of calories that we eat. Our portion size and sense of portion size has gotten completely skewed. And so this is obviously difficult to do, but as a goal, this is really as simple as it gets. Okay, so just as a little humorous break, you know, we can learn a lot from wild animals because they know how to eat. They eat lots of plant foods, they eat lots of wild game that are eating on the grass. What if they gave that up and they went to McDonald's instead? Here's what would happen. Not that. Oh, come on. Why is it doing this? Where's my AB guy? I know, it's right there. Okay, there we go. One more for you. All right, so let that be a lesson to you. As Karolyn says, McDonald's drive-thru is called drive-through for a reason. Don't stop, just keep on going. So what do we want to do? We want to have a colorful plant-based diet where the calories that we take in equal the calories we expend. So the other benefit of exercising is you get to eat more. And what do you get to eat more of? This beautiful array of colorful, naturally colorful foods that we can find from our plant kingdom and get all of those beautiful flavonoids to help all of our key bodily systems.
Okay, so Lise just told us what to eat, but we feel it's equally important how we eat. Very important. We feel that eating should be an experience. It should actually be a sensual experience using all of our senses. We know that people who eat mindfully, they slow down, they make it experience. They're eating mindfully, they actually have a less tendency to be obese. People who are eating mindlessly and fast eaters, they not only are more obese, there's a more tendency to have type 2 diabetes. So slow down your experience and enjoy it. This is a perfect time to be grateful. I have to tell you, we were eating outside with, you know, wonderful friends, and it was lovely. A great lunch, Jan. Okay, dietary supplements is our next strategy. And yes, we believe in dietary supplements and we take dietary supplements, but we also believe that dietary supplements are called supplements for a reason. They are meant to supplement a healthy diet. So we like to look at your health plan, our health plan, as a three-legged stool. The foundation is movement, diet, and rejuvenation, and we're going to be talking about that. And then we layer on the supplements to help enhance that effort. And we have 5 that that Dr. Alschuler is going to tell you about right now.
So a lot of information. You probably can't read that very well back there, but Jen, will they have access to these slides, do you think, at some point, in some way?
They will all be included on the YouTube.
Oh, on the YouTube. Okay, good. So basically, again, through our research, it became very clear that, you know, of course we can't write a prescription that fits everyone, but in general, most people will benefit from supplementation of these 5 dietary supplement groups. And of course, to really get more clear on this, this would be another instance where it would make a lot of sense to go see a naturopathic doctor or an integrative physician of some kind. But just in general, Omega-3 fatty acids are important. Our bodies are used to getting omega-3 fatty acids, but evolutionarily we did that when we ourselves ate a lot of plant food. That was pretty much all we ate, or we lived near the ocean and ate a lot of fish. And we don't often do that very much anymore. So we get deficient in these omega-3 fatty acids over time, and without good omega-3 fatty acids, we will become inflamed, without a doubt. They're very, very critical anti-inflammatory compounds. We also need them for our immune system, for detoxification, even for balancing our stress response system. So some degree of supplementation when you're not eating fish is probably a good thing. We also discovered that probiotics are very important, and this is an area of incredible research right now. Probiotics are healthy bacteria that inhabit our digestive system, our skin, our genital tracts, and as it turns out, there are way more bacteria than there are human cells in each of us. In fact, part of our grand, spiritually deep purpose on this planet is to carry bacteria around. Truly. We are vehicles. We are just vectors for the bacteria. They rule the world. Bacteria and fungi, absolutely. But having said that, we can do a number on our bacteria through our lifestyle, through the medications that we take, through the treatments that we receive, and the bacteria, especially in our digestive tract, can become very imbalanced. And with that imbalance, those 5 key bodily systems begin to unravel. So replanting some of those bacteria can be very health-producing. Another category are polyphenols, or also known as flavonoids. Those are the same compounds I talked about that give those beautiful colors to plant foods. We can also extract some of these flavonoids, and we've discovered they're actually very powerful, can be very powerful in our fight against cancer specifically. So things that you probably heard about, things like curcumin, things like EGCG from green tea, resveratrol, quercetin. These are all examples of flavonoids that you can supplement with to encourage the natural processes of health and balance in your body. Fourth category is antioxidants, especially for people who have gone through active treatment. And this is not something, this particular category, it's not something you necessarily want to do during chemotherapy or radiation. But after chemotherapy or radiation, people are very antioxidant depleted. And yet we need antioxidants in order to have healthy cells on a very fundamental level. And without a proper antioxidant ratio in our body, we start to see a deterioration again in those 5 key bodily pathways. So antioxidants as simple as vitamin C, vitamin E, and perhaps glutathione, selenium. These are all examples of some supplemental antioxidants. And then the final category is vitamin D. Lots of research on vitamin D. Very simply put, people who are deficient in vitamin D have a higher risk of every chronic disease that we know of: dementia, cancer, cardiovascular disease, arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, you name it, there's an inverse relationship. So we want to test our vitamin D, and if we're low, we need to supplement it till we get up to the proper range. Yes, we can get vitamin D from sunlight, but there's a lot of issues with that, of course, particularly here in Denver, where there's a lot of skin cancer going around, so you need to be a little bit cautious with that. But some sunlight is good, of course, but a lot of people need to supplement in addition.
I'm just waiting for us to bump into each other when we make the trade-off. This is a very important topic for us, and I have to admit, when we first started writing about environmental toxins, I would get overwhelmed, because we kind of live in a very toxic world. But as you dig into this subject, you realize that there are things we can do, that we can feel empowered even though we live in this toxic world. So this is also from the Environmental Working Group. We are so excited that they came out with a new handout. Go to ewg.org, as Lise mentioned. They came out with a new booklet that clearly identifies their 12 chemicals that they have linked directly to increased cancer risk. But they've also given suggestions on how to reduce risk, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, because reducing risk is how you will feel empowered. So one way to reduce risk is to, like if you look at the top line, BPA. So we know we want to do BPA-free plastics. If we're going to eat out of a can, it needs to be BPA-free. You know, don't always take your cash register receipt, just little things like that. And that's the other thing that the Environmental Working Group has made it very clear. We're not talking about one big blast of one toxin. We're talking about little exposures to multiple toxins throughout your day, week, that build up. So that's why it's very important to kind of look at all categories of your life. So the other category that we look at is body care products. Use natural body care and skin care products whenever possible. If you think about it, your skin is the largest organ of your body. So if you're slathering parabens and phthalates and other estrogen mimickers all over this organ, it's going to get absorbed. So natural skincare products and natural cleaning products. Fortunately, there are a lot of options out there now. I remember a decade ago there was nothing, you know, but now there are a lot of options for us to choose from when it comes to natural cleaning products and natural skincare products. And then finally, we highly recommend that people get a high quality water filter and a high quality air filter for your home. And that's going to help make this not such an overwhelming topic. This is me. Strategy number 4. This is actually our stress reduction strategy, or you could call it our stress reduction strategy, but we don't call it stress reduction strategy because we don't want to have you, sometimes you can't reduce the amount of stress in your life, right? So what we want to do is give you tools to deal with whatever stress, whether it's high stress or low stress, whatever stress you can. So we've come up with 5 R's of rejuvenation. Remediate. Remediate means to remedy, make peace with. And that is going to, you could probably look at all aspects of your life. Where can I make peace? Rhythm. This is talking about the circadian rhythm, the natural circadian rhythm of your body. You know, let me give you an example of this. The liver, that major organ of detoxification, it's most active at night. And if you're pulling an all-nighter and you're not sleeping, your liver can't do its job and you're going to become your detoxification system will become overwhelmed. And then we have rest, which is sleep, relax, which is different. Sometimes we ask people, well, how do you relax? And they kind of glaze over. And they're like, We would ask that, if we ask you, how do you relax? We want you to rattle off 3, 4, 5 things. But then we want you to say, okay, I'm going to do those every single day. I'm going to do at least one of those every single day. And then, of course, there's replenish. Replenish body and soul. Dr. Alschuler talked about hydration. That is how we replenish our body. Creativity is how we replenish our soul. We dance, we journal, we garden. You know, find some ways to enhance and tap into that creativity. I know we're running out of time, but this topic is really important, and it's sleep. After my surgery, I was surgically induced menopause at age 33. And I was an insomniac overnight. And I was horribly addicted to Ambien. And I was thinking I was doing myself a favor because I was reading the studies that said if I don't get enough sleep, I'm going to be obese, my immune system is going to be weak, and I'm going to be insulin resistant. But then I read the studies that say that sleeping pills like Ambien were increasing my risk of cancer by 30%. Fortunately, I am now taking a product that Dr. Alschuler formulated, and I believe she did it for me. It has high-dose melatonin, very high-dose melatonin, L-theanine, and I take extra L-theanine, magnolia, and magnesium. And it's called ProThrivers Sleep, and it helps me. And it's been a life changer because now I'm sleeping and I'm not taking Ambien.
What's it called again?
ProThrivers Sleep. You can get it through Dr. Shore if you want. But there's a flyer in the back, too.
Okay, last strategy. Yep, we're going to be good on time. So we've heard a lot about this, but we couldn't, and we almost took it out of our presentation because you've heard so much about it, but then we thought we can't not talk about spirit because, you know, that doesn't make any sense to us, so we're going to have to give it a little bit of airtime here. But really, this is really important. This is, for me, for the sake of what? And here's how it relates to all the things we've talked about, because we've covered, obviously, a lot, and you're probably swimming in a soup of biochemistry and lifestyle strategies. But when you kind of go back and dissect, or maybe you'll come away with one thing you want to do differently, it's going to be hard because change is hard. So when we make lifestyle changes that are difficult, one way to motivate ourselves is to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? What is the point of being healthier? And really the answer to that question is should and can be a deep answer that is all about fulfilling our life purpose. Maybe it's today because I want to look into those brown eyes of my dog and melt away. Maybe it's because I want to feel the sun on my back. Maybe it's because I want to be of service to somebody today. Whatever it is that answering that question for the sake of what is truly the North Star in our life. And as we make these bodily changes to change our terrain, we have to remember and incorporate these things. As Mary Oliver, one of my favorite poets, wrote in one of her poems, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" I think that's a beautiful question and something that we all deserve to ask and answer ourselves every day. And as Tigger says, life is not about how fast you run or how high you jump, but how well you bounce. So we're going to get some bouncing going on. We're going to drop our insulin resistance. We're going to improve our immunity. We're going to get chronic inflammation, those embers to die out. We're going to get our hormones more balanced, and we're going to improve our digestion and detoxification, and we're going to do that through these 5 strategies of diet, movement, supplements, rejuvenation, and spirit. And if you liked this little taste, we do have lots of ways you can learn more. We have together, we've published some books. We're going to do a book signing at the break, and we've talked ad nauseum, as you'll see. One book's like Harry Potter the Eighth. Well, we've talked a lot about these things, and you can certainly read those. We also host a radio show every Tuesday night, and I learn every night from that show, and we have great guests on the show, experts in what they do, so welcome you to join us for that. It's also rebroadcast on iHeart, free, of course, so lots of resources for you from our end as well. Thank you.